This has been great. This has been funny as hell. We've been trying to get started. It's been
It's been an hour.
Has it really been an hour?
It's been an
There's
hour.
no way it's been an hour.
Yeah, because
It is what it is. It would be us if we weren't not prepared. Oh, yeah, I don't understand how it is so much better. That makes zero sense.
it's the ghost.
It's not. We're not doing that. It's not the ghost. If it's the ghost, you brought it because this is where you work.
Oh, it's my fault now?
You said it.
Okay, all right. Cool.
You said it. Sorry, you guys came into the middle of that conversation. We were talking about, if you guys don't follow us on Facebook or Instagram, by the way, Super Dylan 10 and Cowgirl Rebel Prince. Say it.
Yeah, Cowgirl Rebel Princess, because I made it when I was 17 years old.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have an Instagram until like 3 years ago.
For real?
Yeah. I was so late to the party, it wasn't even funny. And now I prefer it over.
Thought I was a cowgirl.
I prefer it over. I'm Super Dylan 10 on everything. My email, anything that I use is Super Dylan because it's so much easier and it's always been fun. But anyway, we were talking about a book. So anybody who doesn't know me, I am slightly obsessed with the occult, as in like ghost stories and stuff like that. And one of my favorite books, and we'll probably talk about this in another episode. One of my favorite stories is the story of the Sallie House, which is it was probably one of the most haunted houses in the United States. It's in Atchison, Kansas. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details, but we were talking about doing a paranormal episode for you guys because we both enjoy that. Well, I think it'd be a lot of fun. But the more I read this book, the more I was realizing, I don't know if this is the one that we want to do.
Maybe there's a starter house.
Maybe there's a starter house that we can go to because the more I read about this, and like I said, I won't get into a lot of it. The more I read about it, the more I realized, I don't know. I'm not backtracking on my obsession. No. But I might have to backtrack on that particular house. So
and then literally while we were sitting here, we discussed it, and then all of a sudden the lights came on. And they're not on like you have to get up and physically touch the light switch. Yeah. And I was like, I'm out.
Yeah. We were sitting there talking about it and I was like, I didn't do that. That was not me. What did you bring to my office? I didn't do anything. So that's what we were talking about before we got started. So that'll be something that we do down the line, hopefully. We still have to discuss that because the Sallie House was definitely on our radar, but the more research I do on it, it's going off the radar for a few days. So on that note, so I think to preface this, two things. One of our more popular, well, not one of our more popular, but it was one of the ones that got the most views, I guess, was when I did a small snippet on No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, and I discussed a little bit of stuff in that book. At that time, I was still in the middle of the book, and I have since started rereading it again. And we discovered that episode was kind of an interesting topic for a lot of people. So we decided that we are going to take a deeper dive into it, and we're going to talk about it, which is great because it's good. It's great because two things. This is a book written by a man that talks about men getting their needs right, which doesn't get discussed a lot. But also, it doesn't get talked about from a female perspective, which is great because a female perspective is needed on this particular topic because a lot of the things that are discussed in this book are also correlate with female emotions as well. And we'll get it. We'll dive into that too. So full disclosure, I am not an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination. But if you are a guy who thinks that you are suffering from being, or if you say I'm a nice guy, why can't I highly recommend reading this book, and you will discover a lot about yourself. Because when I was reading this book, I was like, this is a book written about me. This guy was literally following me around, just watching me and writing a book about myself is what it was. And it was not a fun discovery. I will tell you that. Actually, hindsight being 2020, it wasn't fun at the time, but it is fun now because talking about it and reading about it and learning about it has been so fun. So I highly recommend it. No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's not exactly, it's again, it's a misleading title, but once you read it, you'll discover exactly what it means. So yeah, so like I said, full disclosure, I'm not an expert. But this is something that I've discovered. These are a book that I've read and discovered stuff about myself. So we're going to discuss it into detail, and I'll discuss a lot of the stuff because again, like I said, in the book, he does dive into the female emotional part of this. And I'm hoping to get a little bit of your perspective and again, if there's any ladies out there that you hear anything that you disagree with, perfectly fine to listen to it. So with that being said, I know that I don't want to do the majority of the talking. So Marie, what do you want to talk about?
Okay, so as Dylan mentioned, we are talking about the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. And in the book, Dr. Glover breaks down what he calls the nice guy syndrome and lays out a plan for men to stop being passive, start setting boundaries, and actually get what they want in relationships, careers, and in life. So today I'm putting him in the hot seat, and we're going to break this book down into 4 segments. So Dylan, it's my turn. Are you ready to unpack the age-old nice guy dilemma?
I am. Before I start, so a little bit of background. So Robert Glover was a family and marriage counselor for 35 years, or he still is, but his main focus after about 2007 was, men's. So he did a lot. So when a lot of people like to ask, well, what perspective is he speaking from? Well, two things. One, his perspective is he was the nice guy at one point. He had the career, he had all of it, but he was the nice guy. And also, he has a PhD in family and marriage counseling, I think, is what it was. So he's an expert on the topic, and like I said, it dives a lot deeper into discussing. And I'll also put a link on my social media because I actually have started the process of joining one of his men's groups that he does through his. I think he does it digitally. So I've started the process of joining one of his men's groups. So I haven't started yet, but I'm interested to see. So anyway, sorry, did not mean to derail you on that. But
no, it's
anyway.
Cool. So let's just start with a couple questions first. Who recommended this book, or did you decide to pick it up on your own?
Okay. So everybody knows that over the past couple of years, probably the last 3 years, that I have been doing a lot of self-discovery and evolving. And we all know, because I talk about him on a regular basis, my therapist Frank. He was the one who recommended this book for me. He's recommended a lot of books, but through our multiple conversations and a lot of the stuff, because a lot of the, I guess, problems that it would stem from, I would feel like was stemming from my dating life, or of course lack thereof. So he recommended this book because I talked about being the nice guy, and he's like, I think you need to read this book. So I read this book, and I practically read it cover to cover in almost 2 weeks, which
Nice.
The reason it took me, so I love reading. The reason it took me 2 weeks was because of the fact that, again, I was reading a book about myself, and it was a lot of like
self-discovery.
yeah. And I was like, okay, I need to not read this as fast as I want to, because like I said, it was a good discovery, but it was also one of those things because I'll dive into a deeper detail of it, but there was a couple of things that kind of like made me like mad, and it kind of hurt, and I hurt my own feelings basically with reading this book. So, and I'll get into that. So, but yeah, that's why I started reading the book, and it was because my therapist recommended it, and I recommend it to honestly, I would recommend it to any guy who, regardless of where you're at in your life, I would highly recommend reading it no matter what. So
okay, well, you kind of just answered my next question, which was, what were your initial thoughts when you started reading the book? Like, I guess you were a little, for lack of better words, angry.
So my initial thought was, when he told me like the title, No More Mr. Nice Guy, my initial thought was, okay, so this is going to be about me not being the nice guy anymore, which means I'm going to be the bad guy or be the villain, which anybody who knows me, I have no problem playing that role. It's easy for me sometimes, right? But I enjoyed being a nice guy. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to be the right thing. But as I read the book, I discovered the title was misleading. So that's where it started getting to not necessarily the anger portion, but it started getting to, okay, so this is not what it seems. This is not the book about not being a nice guy. It is, but it isn't.
Well, that being said, do you think nice guy has a positive or negative impact, meaning in everyday conversations?
So I think it depends. I think it has a negative and a positive. It has a negative connotation as far as, because you hear it all the time, right? Women are like, he's a nice guy, right? But that's about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't really hear anything after that.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. Or actually, no, take it back. You hear he's a nice guy, but it's never he's just a nice guy. It's a nice guy, but.
All caps.
So it's, like I said, it's positive because it's okay to be a nice guy, but it's negative because there's always that but. And that's where the but comes into play, if that makes sense.
I can see that. I do.
Because as much as girls say they like a nice guy, they don't like a completely nice guy. We all know that.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction there. We're gonna move and groove right along into our first segment, which I'm gonna call What is the Nice Guy Syndrome? So let's start by defining what Dr. Glover means by nice guy syndrome. He describes it as men who try to be overly agreeable, avoid conflict, and put others' needs before their own, often in hopes of getting love, approval, or validation in return. But here's the kicker. According to Glover, nice guys don't actually get what they want. Instead, they end up frustrated, resentful, and feeling unseen. So, does this definition sound familiar to you? Do you think this is something a lot of guys struggle with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the nice guy syndrome is self-sabotaging. So when you're too nice of a guy and you're easily agreeable and you always do what you feel is right, or you don't want to cause conflict or whatever, right? You're never, and you think that by doing that, it's going to make people like you or even love you or make them think. But at the end of the day, it doesn't get you what you want at all. You're just, for lack of a better term, you're being overly nice and you're avoiding conflict and you're always trying to please others, essentially. So it always backfires. And the biggest thing that comes with that it also becomes resentment. Because at the end of the day, you'll always be seeking validation. You'll always be seeking approval from others. You'll never be internally happy with who you are if you're always that person.
That is super powerful.
Yes. The other thing too is it also stems a fear of rejection.
Ooh.
Because you're afraid that if you say what you want to say or you do the things you actually want to do as opposed to what everybody else wants to do, that you're going to end up getting rejected. And nice guys don't like being rejected. Nobody likes being rejected, but nice guys fear it more because, again, of that validation and approval seeking.
Yeah. I'm like, how's my gears turning? Like, do you feel like nice guys kind of wait for things to happen to them so that they don't have to put themselves out there?
Exactly. So,
but then they get mad if it doesn't happen the way they want it to.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So this is a little early on, but think about it like this. So you meet somebody, you guys mesh together, right? And you're the nice guy. You're always agreeable. You're doing everything for them, putting them on a pedestal, doing all these lovely things for them, right? But they don't reciprocate or they don't feel the same way. It's very early on in the relationship. You're trying to figure stuff out, right? Or it's not even a relationship. It's just trying to get them to figure out if this is going to work, right? So you're doing all these nice things, trying to figure out, taking on dates, paying for everything. In hindsight, that's great. But at the end of the day, if they're not reciprocating, right? At that point, you start seeking that validation more. You start wanting it more. And it just gets convoluted until at a certain point that approval seeking turns into resentment. And then it turns into a form of, it's resentment. So like you go from being the nice guy to playing the victim, essentially, because you're like, I did all these things for them and they don't like me. Why don't they like me? They need to like me. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
So that's Honestly, that was probably the breaking point for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that was the biggest breaking point for me, was I don't understand why I'm a nice guy. That's where I started. Again, that's where the book came into play. Is my therapist was like, you are a nice guy, but you need to understand what that actually means. You need to understand why. And so that's what this book did, is it helped me understand why I wasn't getting what I wanted. And it was because I was being too nice.
This book really kind of opened your eyes to that.
Because so one of the things, there was 3 things that he covered in that book, and it was sabotaging. Good Lord.
You got it.
Dishonesty and dependency. And those were 3 big things that were like, again, that was another reason why I had to take a look back. I had to like pause on reading the book full way, because reading those 3 portions of that book and understand exactly kind of made me not like myself. Even which is even worse, because anybody that knows me knows that I have problems liking myself anyway. I hope you guys didn't pick up on the sirens. Well, you probably did, because these mics pick up on everything.
Except us.
Except us, right? They hear everything, but they don't hear us. But yeah, so that was the reason why I had to like pause reading the book for a little bit, because it made me not like myself. And then when I had my next appointment with my therapist,
you're probably like, Frank,
I was like, hey man, why am I reading this book? I was like, we're talking about trying to make me like myself a little bit more, or even love myself, and this book is making me not like myself. He goes, gee, I wonder why. And I went, the amount of times, I'll tell you this, the amount of times that I cussed at my therapist, I'm surprised he hasn't told me I can't come back. And I mean it, and when I do that, I mean it with love, right? Because it's like, but I'm surprised he's like, yeah. But again, this is one of those cases where he was like, just keep reading. He goes, and then we'll talk about it later. So we'll talk about it again.
So where do you think this initial behavior comes from? Is it society, parenting?
It is so in my opinion,
personal experiences.
I think it's a combination of all 3. All right. So I say couple things. One, parenting. So I don't want to sound this, but sometimes I don't feel like growing up young boys are, because everybody knows this, men and women are different in the way that they learn and the way they operate. Most guys that I know, myself, operate by doing and learning, and sometimes it's vice versa, or it's the same way sometimes, right? So a lot of times there are certain cases where guys, like growing up, young boys, teenagers, guys don't spend a lot of time around their dads. So they've got absentee fathers. They have a father, but they're absent. They're either at work all the time, come home and don't want to do anything. They don't go to gatherings. They don't do, I guess, manly type stuff. So,
okay.
And there's a lot of stuff on the internet about, guys aren't guys anymore. They're not manly enough and all this other stuff, right? There is some truth to that, but not in the way that these people define this whole toxic masculinity garbage. It's just a matter of sometimes growing up, guys don't spend a lot of times with their dads. So they don't know exactly what it means to be a man, or how to be a man, or what is, the capability. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing, parenting. So they spend a lot of times around there. They spend a lot of time around mothers who some mothers, depending on who you are often nurturing, coddling, and all this other stuff. So they get they learn that a different way of growing up, right? Society. So this was a big key for me, and I apologize if any of my teachers are out there listening to this. I mean no disrespect. So I want you to think back to when you were in elementary school. How many male teachers were in the profession at that time? Almost none, right?
I only ever had one, and that wasn't until 4th grade.
Exactly. And so growing up in school, a lot of teachers were female. Nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I feel like teaching is a labor of love regardless. So in that profession, I feel like women have an advantage because they're more suited to that, right?
At that level.
At that level, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But think about it like this. So you're a young guy, you're a young kid. You learn pretty quickly, right? That if I don't make my teacher mad, I'm not going to get in trouble. And you learn that as long as I, for lack of a better term, satisfy my teacher, who's a female, I'm not going to get in trouble, and I'm going to get rewarded, and I'm going to get a prize. Like, think about it. Like, I don't say anything wrong. I don't do anything wrong. I don't get my chart signed at the end of the day.
Right.
By my teacher.
You get your little smiley face and
yeah. So you learn at a pretty young age that as long as I keep her happy, I'm going to get rewarded. And that's where that's where the kicker comes into play. Of you spend a good chunk of your time trying to keep a woman happy, but you're doing it the right ways at that time. But again, that kicks into your brain. As long as I do it this way, I'm going to get the love and acceptance that I want. Right. So you have the combination of, you've got an absentee father who doesn't spend a lot of time with their son, and they don't do, I guess, guy activities, right? Go hunting, fishing, all this other stuff, right? But then you go into school where you're learning that as long as I keep this woman happy, for lack of a better term, I'm going to be happy and they're going to love me, right?
Okay.
Again,
okay.
Nothing, because a lot of my teachers were female, and I loved all of them. I don't mean any disrespect by that, but I'm just saying that's those combinations of that is where it comes into play, because it gets put in your head, because then you go home and you do stuff for your mom, right? And as long as she's happy, nothing goes wrong, right? So automatically you're ingrained in your head that I'd have to satisfy this woman, right? And it just kind of
grows,
snowballs from there, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So again, it's different for it's different for a lot of people, but that's where some of it stems from, is those two particular. So it's society and then parenting. And then what was the other one that you mentioned?
Personal experience.
And then personal experience. It's, if I'm nice to this girl, she's going to like me back, right? It's all intertwined, right? You learn this, and it just it's just a circle. But eventually it stops working, and then you don't know what to do next. That's where the nice guy thing comes into play. Is
this has worked my whole life.
This is how I was taught to do this my entire life, but nobody's told me any different, right?
Do you think men are taught to be nice guys to fit in or be more likable? So it kind of plays into what we just talked about. It's interesting just to think about your views on, not necessarily yours, but the general view of what you just pointed out, and how because I'm trying to think about I don't think it was until high school that I really saw an influx of male teachers.
Yeah.
And the few male teachers that I did have leading up to that, they not not exactly the best male role models.
Right? Exactly. And see, but again, that's where like the teaching profession has always been, I don't want to say, well, yeah, whatever. It's been dominated by the female perspective, by females, which is, again, the way it was when we were growing up. That's just the way it was, right? But again, it's not just about that. It's also like, you don't have a dad at home who's spending time with you, so you don't really understand how to be a guy. And I hate to say this, but you understand, like, you don't understand you're not being taught how to be a woman, because that's not right. It's not the way it is. But it's also, you're getting one perspective, and the perspective is the same. You're not getting, these outdoor activities that teach you about growing up and stuff like that, right? So, but yeah, it wasn't until about 7th, 8th grade that I started having male teachers. I can count on one finger. I can only think of one male teacher that I had that would have fit into the category of that I would consider, like, as of right now, would have been a good role model. But of course you had, at that time I was also in athletics as well, so I had male coaches as well.
Right.
So, by the time I got to that point or whatever, or by the time you get to that point, you're already in, some stuff is already ingrained in your brain. So it's hard to break that, right?
You're not as impressionable.
Yeah, and you don't understand what it is. So yeah. But yeah, if you think about it, it's like sometimes, like at one point, men were conditioned to keep women happy. How do you do that, right? Well, don't get in trouble. Don't say anything wrong. Don't, make sure that they're happy. Do all these nice things, and they're going to love you back, or they're going to reward you. Well, teachers, you're not going to get in trouble, which means you don't get it. This teacher is happy. As long as you don't get in trouble at school, you go home, mom's not going to be mad at you. So that's going to be happy, and then it's like, okay, so these two are happy. I'm happy. Dad's not around. Things fine. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. So hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to you guys. If it doesn't make sense, I'm sorry. But
have you ever felt like you had to act nicer than you wanted to just to avoid confrontation or to be liked?
Oh yeah, all the time. My entire life has been nothing. And again, this was one of the parts that I had to stop reading for a second because I was being dishonest. I realized that my entire life I was being dishonest about everything that I was doing, and I hated that. So I've always prided myself on being who I am. Well, not being who I am, but above, this nice guy was not an act for me. It was. What was happening was I was being dishonest to the people around me. I wasn't telling my feelings. I wasn't telling them exactly what I wanted to tell them. I didn't, just to avoid conflict, I would just agree, out of fear of getting in trouble at home. I wouldn't speak my mind. I'm in different parts of relationships. I would have abusive partners who would continuously abuse me, but it would be as long as I make them happy or do my best to make them happy, they'll eventually stop. And it never did. But at that point, so it's like I was being dishonest to everybody around me by A, not telling them exactly how I felt, B, not speaking my mind, and C, allowing them to continue with the behaviors that I didn't like. And it was as long as I keep quiet, they'll eventually figure out, or as long as I make them happy, they'll eventually figure out that I don't like this, or I'll hope that they figure it out, or they'll ask me, right? But they're not going to ask you. It's just going to be, this is what I want to do. What do you want to do? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Or no, I think we should do this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So instead of having an actual conversation, you're just going with the flow, and you're like, even though you don't think it's a good idea or whatever, or you don't want to do that, you're not saying anything because you don't want to start a fight. You don't want to have confrontation. So you're being dishonest with yourself and being dishonest with them around you as well. And also in a relationship from a female perspective. So we talked about, we've delved into it a couple of times of being friends with women. It's often difficult, not because you can't be friends with them. It's often difficult from a nice guy stance, because you don't make your feelings up front, right? You pretend to be their friend in hopes that they eventually like you, right? And then it never happens, and they go with somebody else who's less agreeable or who they have no business being with, but they do that, right? And then you're like, well, and then you start to resent them because you're like, I did all these nice things, right? And they don't want to be with me, right? Why, right? So then you were their friend, but you were their friend because you wanted to sleep with them.
You wanted more.
You wanted more of that, but you didn't communicate with that. So whose fault is that really? That's the nice guy's fault.
Yours.
Exactly. Right? Now, could you have saved yourself a lot of trouble by saying, hey, I'll be your friend, but just know X, Y, and Z. This is how I feel. You can save yourself a lot of trouble. And you can learn a lot at that point in time with that conversation, because I don't really want to be friends with them because they don't see me in the same light, or we don't have agreeable. You know what I'm saying? But instead, you continuously chase them around, trying to do nice things for them and hoping that eventually they just fall in love with you. And then they don't, and then you're mad. And then also that's also another thing of dishonesty, because you weren't genuine with your free feelings. They're like, I just like you as a friend. No problem. I have no problem being your friend. Technically, that's a lie, because you do have a problem being their friend because you wanted to be with them.
Yeah.
That was another thing that I had to learn, was how many friendships did I actually enter? Right. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to put myself into a box and be like, I don't want to be around anybody anymore, because I don't know how honest I've been with all these other things. Right. Because we talked about being a friend first. Well, how many times have I been a friend first? Really? You know what I'm saying? That was one of those things where I was like, I hate that about myself, because how dishonest was I? Right. So that was another self-discovery thing that I had to actually come to grips with and realize, all right, it's not as bad as you think it is, but it's still bad. So you need to fix that.
Well, yeah, you just totally took all the words from my brain. So let's see. Are there any of these highlights that you want to hit before we move on to the next section? You have me thinking about these. Well, I'm sure we'll go into it in a second, but what you were talking about entering into friendships and what they call those in the book. So I think that's the next little section we'll talk about.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move into our second segment, the hidden struggles of a nice guy. One of the biggest issues Glover points out is that nice guys don't actually communicate what they want. Instead of saying, hey, I need this, they expect people to just know, like we just talked about. And when that doesn't happen, resentment builds. So let's talk about how this plays out in real life. Have you ever had to help? Okay. Have you ever held back what you really wanted in a situation hoping someone would just get it?
All the time. I had spent my entire childhood, teenage, and adult life hoping that somebody would get it, right? And it just created more resentment and self-sabotaging, and then just me just playing the victim, because it's like, why don't they understand? They need to understand. I can't understand why they don't understand.
Powerful.
They've known me so long. I've known them for 15, 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever. We've been friends since kids, or this is my parents, this was my girlfriend. Why don't they understand?
But you're not communicating.
But I'm not communicating it. So it's like, it's just a vicious cycle of, I resent them because they don't understand, but I'm not telling them they don't what I want. They're never going to know. One of my favorite sayings my therapist talks about all the time is he always says, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know something, you can't address it, right? And that goes for any portion of your life, no matter what. If you don't know, if you're mad at your friend and you don't tell them you're mad, you can't expect them to know that you're mad.
Yeah.
So you can't get mad at them, or you can be mad at them, but you can't get mad at them if they don't know why you're mad. You can't call them or whatever and be like, I've been mad at you for the last 2 months or whatever. And then, because of X, Y, and Z, and you're like, I had no clue. Why didn't you tell me? Or, it's just a matter of, you don't know what you don't know. So if they don't know that you're unhappy or you need something, you can't expect them to know it. You have to let them know.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not fair to anybody.
Yeah. And it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to them. Exactly. It's not fair to your partner or your friends who are like, hey, is this okay? And it's not okay with you, but you're like, yeah, because you don't want to cause a conflict, right? You don't want to cause a fight. How many married couples do you know that are
the famous words, pick your battle?
Yeah. But guys are unhappy, right? Because, if their partner is always constantly unhappy with them, what are they going to do? Try to make them happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to help anything. Well, it might, but I have no reason to speak about marriage or anything like that. I do have a lot of male friends and female friends who are married. They vent and get upset about their husbands to other people, but they don't vent to their actual partner. And you're like, why aren't you telling him this? Or why aren't you telling her this?
I think it depends on how long you've been together, been married, and how far you've matured in the relationship. Because 40 years from now, I can promise you I'm going to have absolutely no problem saying whatever I want to Colin, and he'll say the exact same thing back to me.
Yeah.
Right now, I think it's a good balance of, hey, I need time to really think about my words I want to say to you. But in the very beginning of the relationship, it was like, I'm not going to say anything because I want him to think that I'm perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, in this balance, I think talking about it to someone else helps me personally figure out the words I want to say, so that in the moment, and there's always going to be those moments where your mouth speaks before your brain catches up.
Oh yeah.
But talking about it to someone else helps you kind of turn the gears in your head to figure out exactly the words you want to say, so that they don't come across angry, rude, resentful, just to kind of figure out, how do I say this in the best way that's not going to cause a fight, because nobody likes fighting.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
That's my
Nobody,
personal thoughts on
yeah,
it.
nobody likes fighting. Nobody likes fighting with their significant other. If you allow things to go on for too long, what's going to happen? Right? You're going to fight.
Everyone's going to be mad.
You're going to fight no matter what, right?
And then it's going to blow up and be worse.
Exactly. You're going to hold all this stuff in, and then what's going to happen is one other thing is going to trigger you, and then all this other stuff is going to snowball. Again, it just comes back to, why didn't you tell me that sooner, right? I had a recent experience with that with a friend of mine. I did something that they didn't like, and I had no clue. I had zero clue about any how unhappy they were or what happened. And then we had hung out, and then a couple months later, they sent me this scathing video telling me all this stuff. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, I had no clue. I had no clue how unhappy that, or how upset that made you, or, but let me break this down for you so you can understand that's not what happened. This is what happened. Right. And that's always regardless of where you're at, that is always a terrifying and horrible feeling, is when somebody just completely unloads on you and they just spew this venom-laced, just not hate, but it's just all this stuff that you've done in the past or that they've done in the past, and they just let all that out. And then all of a sudden you're like, and the only words you can get out is, well, why didn't you tell me? Why couldn't you have told me this when it happened? Right? What's worse is, why couldn't you have told me when we were face to face so that we could have an actual conversation? And that's where that whole nice guy routine comes from, is you just hope that they understand, you hope they get it. And when they don't, you just get mad, and it just leads to resentment. And that's no way to live your life. No way to live your life. I think we got off topic. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Why do you think some guys struggle with asking for what they want, whether in relationships, friendships, or even at work?
It's the fear of rejection. It's the moniker of no, it's not a moniker. Sorry. It's the fear. It's just the fear of rejection. You hope that if you continue to do what you do, somebody will eventually get it, and you are afraid that if you speak your mind, because think about it, like when you're older or when you were growing up, right? You wanted something, and you didn't get it. It hurt your feelings, right? Think about when you were in high school. You wanted to be on the basketball team, but you couldn't get it, right? You wanted to do all these other things, but you couldn't get it, right? That continuously compounds over years, and and then also it just like, well, if I expect disappointment, then I'm not going to be disappointed, right? And then that leads to not asking, and you're like, if I don't get rejected, the answer is, I'll never know what the answer is or whatever, right? Yeah. So you're like, as long as I don't get rejected, they won't, they don't tell me, no, which just means that it's, possibly be yes or whatever, right? So we just keep this vicious cycle of, hopefully they eventually see my value, and they just get it, and eventually they don't, or they just don't, right? So it's friendships, relationships, any portion of your life, work. If you don't make yourself heard, then you're just never going to understand, or they're just never going to understand. You just have to look at it like that. They're not going to understand, not because they don't want to, but because you're not saying anything. And that's where that comes from, is we just hope that they get it, right? And there's always been those cases where somebody eventually got it, and we're like, okay, so this works. So if I keep doing this, it'll eventually it'll eventually work. Right. So
the book talks about covert contracts, which we've mentioned a little bit before in previous episodes, and that's what I was just talking about in this last segment that I was hoping we'd get to. So basically, covert contracts are unspoken agreements that nice guys create in their heads, for example, if I do this favor for her, she'll like me. Do you think this mindset is common?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's common it's common for most guys, and it's common all the way around, right? If I buy her dinner, see that I'm a good person, and she'll like me even more. Um, you know, she needs help with her rent. I'll just go ahead and help her with that because again, I'm a nice guy. She'll eventually see that I'm the one for her. This streamer on TikTok or whatever, right? If I donate money to the stream, she'll eventually see me as somebody of value, right? If I'm friends with this girl long enough, she'll understand that I'm a good person and I'm a nice guy. She'll want to date me soon. She'll want to date me eventually, right? So covert contracts or dishonesty is just flat out basically what it is, right? It's there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sometimes those covert contracts they turn out fine, right? And the reason I say that is because at a certain point, you entered this agreement, right, with this girl or whatever, with the hopes that you could enter a relationship, and eventually it doesn't. They just don't see you that way, right? And then it just leads to resentment, and then you just start. And then have you ever seen this happens all the time? And I'm sure everybody's seen it. So like you've seen when a guy is nice to a girl because he likes her, but he doesn't tell her. He hopes she figures it out, and then eventually, he eventually makes his feelings known or whatever, and then she's like, I just like you as a friend, and he's done all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just does a complete 180 and just doesn't really ghost her, but he just starts treating her like a friend or worse. I don't say worse, but then that girl gets upset because like I thought we were just friends, and he's like, and then that's that covert contract thing, and that's the dishonesty part, is because the only reason you were nice to her was because you wanted to sleep with her, right? Here we go. It's clicking. It's clicking. This is what I was hoping to get to.
How do I word this? I think it depends on what the acts that you're doing for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just mentioned, if you're like paying this girl's rent, or you're out there buying her dinner, or y'all are going on basically dates, and then all of a sudden she's like, but we're just friends. And then you stop doing those things that honestly she's using you for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And gets mad at you. Baloney. Yeah. Baloney. Okay.
But
I hate that. I absolutely hate that.
But think of it like this though. Who's really at fault for that? Yeah, I mean there is a form of being used right there. But in all technicality, who's really at fault for that?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, she's wrong. Yeah, she's wrong for allowing that to continue and taking advantage of that at that extent. But you continue to offer, and you continue that behavior, and you put yourself in that position without speaking your actual feelings. So is it wrong for her to continue that without, saying, hey, just know we're just going to be friends, right? But it's also wrong of him to do those things hoping, and that's the only reason why he was doing those things. So it's a catch-22 essentially, is both are wrong on the fronts, but who's really to blame is the nice guy, because you're being too nice. You were allowing them to take advantage of you. You were blind to the fact that they were taking advantage of you. Were they meaning to take advantage of you? Maybe. Yes and no, possibly. There's no you don't know, but you allowed them to. That's where the resentment comes from, is, well, I did all these nice things for you, and now you don't want this. You don't really like me that way. I don't really see myself talking to you anymore, or vice versa. Yeah. Which is, again, is really dishonest in its own right, because it's like, you should still be their friend. That sucks. Yeah. Again, that rejection sucks, and nobody likes that.
Yeah.
But those covert contracts is what causes these issues, right? It's not, again, like you said, women are just as much to blame as guys for this. But again, it depends on who that woman is, right? It's just, are they going to take advantage of this, or are they going to be like, hey, it's just like, hey, let's go get, guy says, hey, let's go get lunch. let's go get a coffee or whatever. And they're like, before they're like, okay, just keep in mind, it's not a date. We're just going to hang out for a little bit. Okay, cool. Well, now you know where you stand.
Boundaries are set.
And then boundaries are set. So now you can make the decision. Now what?
Do you want to go or not?
Yeah. Well, not even do you want to go or not, but you can just, I could pursue other options.
Yeah.
So, when you don't communicate your actual intentions, you're trying to create something that's either not there, or you're trying to lead somebody into something, right? That they technically don't want to be in, but they fall into that trap because you were nice to them. How many women do you know, right, that have had really bad relationships and all this other stuff? And then they fall for the nice guy. They like the nice guy because he's nice and all this other stuff. But then 2, 3, 4 months down the road, all of a sudden they're back with the same jerk. Well, the guy was too nice, and they discovered that they didn't really like him that way. So what do? They go back to the same. They go back to the same old, and it's a vicious cycle. But because the nice guy, being the nice guy, doesn't communicate everything up front, he does all this other stuff, and Or how many of your friends do you know that they've had so many bad relationships that they meet the one person that's nice to them, and all of a sudden they're just like, oh, they're in love with this person, and then it just doesn't. But then they're just not happy because this guy's too nice. He does all this other stuff, but they stay in this relationship because they're like, I can't get any better, right? So again, that's what covert contract is. I'm doing all these nice things for you to like me, and then they do like you, but then they're not happy, and then nobody's happy, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's where that dishonesty comes into play, and that's where you start, entering those really, really, really bad portions of, well, he's a nice guy, but I wish he would do X, Y, and Z,
But yeah, communication.
But yeah, how many friends do you know that you're like, well, he was a nice guy, but, or vice versa?
I think it's really interesting when a nice guy meets a nice girl, and then you're just kind of stuck in a
never ending. And that's so okay. That brings up a good point. Like, how many, like, she's a nice girl, he's a nice guy. Both of them don't like conflict, so they're just gonna sit there. Eventually, they will start resenting each other because neither one of them are getting their needs fulfilled, and neither one of them knows how to make themselves happy. They're hoping their other partner makes themselves just gets it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you see couples fighting, it's annoying, right? And it's often hard to watch because it makes you uncomfortable. But that's a kind of a form of a healthy relationship.
It is.
Because you're fighting, because not only are you fighting, but you're fighting for yourself. You're fighting for what you want. Granted, sometimes that shit can go a little too far, and you're like,
absolutely,
hold on.
Yeah.
Let's not go down that road. But again, they're fighting because they're fighting for themselves, and they're fighting for what they want. And you're essentially fighting for your relationship because you're like, I want you, but I want you to do this. It's not about, but when you don't do that, you don't fight, you don't argue. Like, I was in 2 or 3 years ago, I was in a relationship where my girlfriend at the time was an incredibly nice woman. She was beautiful, she was smart, she was funny, she was insanely nice. We never fought, ever fought. Almost never had an argument, never had any issues, but neither one of us communicated what we actually wanted to the other person. And then what ended up happening is we ended up living in an apartment together, and we never fought, but we just stopped being happy. We were never happy with each other. Like,
you weren't voicing what you needed.
We weren't voicing what we needed. I wish you would do X, Y, and Z for me. Or I wish you would see me more in this light as opposed to this. But you don't say that because you don't get it. Eventually what happens, right? You start that resentment starts slowly creeping in. And I'll give you an example. So when we were together, I would do a lot of the cooking and a lot of the cleaning.
Okay.
And they would sometimes help out. And when they did help out, it was great because it was really good, right? But eventually, there was never any, we'll say, nobody was really working together. We weren't really working together on that front. So it was just always me hoping that they would help or they would do something or vice versa, right? They never did, and I never communicated. So eventually I just started resenting them for not doing that. But hey, we're happy. We're in this apartment. We're thriving. We're okay. What's next? We're reveal about myself. I lose my job and I'm unhappy. I'm not in a good place. And I don't really know what I'm going to do next. I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. She's still working. She goes to work. She comes home. Instead of us spending any time together, she comes home and goes and locks herself in our bedroom. And I don't see her for the rest of the night. And then she goes to sleep. Well, at the end of the day, what happens, right? You start resenting them a little bit more. It's like, oh, they don't want to spend time with me. But you don't voice that. Eventually, towards the end of our relationship, right? We were still living in this apartment together, and I was sleeping on the couch, and she was sleeping in our bedroom. We were sleeping in separate parts.
Okay.
And again, we just grew apart until eventually one of us, we both knew the end was coming, but neither one of us wanted to voice it because, again, we're just too nice.
Do you think it would have been avoidable or had a different path if you guys
had more discussions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And neither one of us did that because we were both from bad parenting, and I don't want to say, one portion did not like conflict and neither one of us liked conflict. And the only way we knew how to resolve conflict was by yelling. And so we always, she hated that. So I always made it a point not to yell. But in my household, when I was growing up, if you didn't yell, you weren't getting heard. So there was a difference of neither one of us knew how to argue, communicate or argue, right? So it just went to, okay, I don't know how to do this, so I'm not going to do that. She doesn't like it when I do this, so I'm not going to do that. But I don't know how to voice my opinion. And so yeah, we just grew apart, and eventually we just broke up.
I think it's I don't want to say powerful because I feel like I've said that a million times already this episode, but I think it's very intuitive that you recognize that and can look back on that and see, oh, well, that's what went wrong. And do you think that came from therapy, like going to therapy and talking about it and understanding?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or do you feel like you knew what was happening in the moment?
So I knew what was happening in the moment, but I didn't fully understand. And I couldn't process it. Yeah, I couldn't process it. And I felt like if I just continued to do everything and just do the best I could, it would eventually fix itself. If I continue doing this cooking, buying the food, doing all the stuff that I can do, it'll eventually fix and it'll be fine. It'll correct its course, but it never did. It just got worse. And the reason it got worse is because it just started that form of resentment. And then it's like, but instead of saying anything, it's just, the other person doesn't know what they don't know. So eventually they just, one of us eventually spoke up and said, this isn't working. But that was said in a form of, I don't want to live together anymore. Okay. Well, you know what? That's fine. I understand that. Neither of us, we're don't really know what we're doing. You're going to go here. I'm going to go there. That's fine. And then we'll just, figure this out as we go. But what that really meant was, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. And you don't know that because you didn't say that. So I'll give you guys a little bit more of an insight. So they said, I don't want to live together anymore. From a personal standpoint, I understood because one, this wasn't really working and it wasn't as fun as it could have been. And I didn't have a job at the time, so I didn't really know what was going to happen. Right. So it would be better if we were in different households, right? Okay. So it's like, okay, in the back of my head, there was the thought of, okay, this relationship is ending. But when I made that thought known, it's like, hey, we've been together for a long time. I really don't want to throw this down the drain. Can we talk about this? The response was, I just don't want to live with you anymore. I don't want to live together anymore. I still want to be together. Okay. Okay. So in my head, it's like, okay, we're fine. Get your stuff. We'll get your stuff. And we'll, the last words that were spoken to me before all of this, or before this relationship ended, was, give me a couple of weeks to get settled, and then we'll talk. Okay, cool. No problem. Full disclosure, 2 weeks turned into 4 months. And the form of communication was a email from their work asking me about the car insurance.
Was it?
That was it. So immediately in my head, it's, okay, well, obviously this is over.
Do you regret not reaching out sooner? Do you think you both were stuck in well, he'll just reach out, or I'll just reach out, or?
So I know from my perspective, That's what it was. Is they'll eventually they said give me 2 weeks, and then I will reach out, and then I'll let you know. So you're waiting on that, right? But sometimes you don't even realize it. 2 weeks, all of a sudden time flies by. You're like, oh shit, it's been 4 months.
I get that. Do you regret not reaching out first?
Yes and no, because it would have given closure to the situation, because I feel like it would have ended regardless, but it would have ended sooner, or it would have been easier. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you this why. I'll tell you why. I said that 3 times. Sorry. So had I reached out sooner, there would have been more of an understanding of we're done. This is what it is, right? But I would have been okay, because, once that email came through, I knew in my head, in my heart, that this is over, this is done. Obviously I'm not important enough for you to call or text. You have to send an email from your fucking work to ask me about something that, was not even on my mind, but thank you for bringing it up, I guess. At that point, I hadn't started my mental health journey. I hadn't started therapy. I hadn't started any of this other stuff. Being stuck, I had no clue what was going on, whatever, right? A couple of years after therapy, right? Or I say after, I'm still in it, and I'm still learning, I'm still going on this. A couple of years afterwards, I reached out, and I was going to be in the same town as her. And I said, hey, I would like to see you, and let's have some coffee. Let's meet at this coffee shop. Let's have some coffee, and let's just kind of catch up, because we hadn't seen each other this was 2021, and I think we had just made contact on, it was 2023, I think, 24. I can't remember. But last year, I can't remember. So we hadn't seen each other in 3 years. And there was always this thing in the back of my head of 2 things need to happen. Either A, I need to tell them exactly that, I'd rather be with you again and try to make this work. Or B, this needs to be put to bed, put to rest. I've started my healing. I've started my evolution. Maybe there's something different here. We meet, and I cannot tell you the disappointing factor of while you're speaking to somebody and understanding and learning that, well, you haven't changed at all. You haven't done anything. You're still the same person you were 3 years ago. And when you openly admit that you're like, I don't like my life without having you in it. I need to figure that out. But then as they continue speaking, you realize I'm better off without you.
The rose-colored glasses came.
Yeah. And then you realize, oh no. So now what do I do? And then you get stuck. Right? Well, you don't really get stuck. So that was an interesting experience, because you when you start this healing journey, right, and you start understanding how things operate, you have no clue.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. And you see other people, and you're like, you're not doing anything to try to better yourself, or you're not doing anything. You're still doing what you used to do. How did I even see you as a possible partner?
Oof.
Which I didn't say that, of course, but you realize that. And so that is where that lack of communication and that nice guy syndrome falls into play, is like, eventually you'll figure out, this was not for me, and this is not where I needed to be. So a little bit of insight into my past there for you guys. So,
well, okay, that is a good segue of, do you think there's a line between being a good person and being too much of a people pleaser?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Being a good person is you genuinely do stuff because you want to, and because it's not the right thing to do. It's because you're getting enjoyment out of it. You're not getting anything from that other person, but you're getting the enjoyment out of it, and it's good. Being a people pleaser gets you walked on, gets you stepped on. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about I am a doormat for absolutely nobody, right? We talked about that.
I added doormats to our TikTok shop just in case anyone wants one.
I saw that, and I was like, that's an interesting play.
I thought it was so funny.
That is funny. You got a doormat that says I am a doormat for absolutely nobody, which is brilliant, by the way. Do I step on this? Do I not?
Yeah. I knew you'd get it.
So people pleasing gets you stepped on, gets you abused, gets you nowhere, right? And again, it's that form of resentment, and you play the victim, because you doing all this people pleasing and they're still not happy. Whose fault really is that? Right? Well, it's on everybody, except the fact that you weren't happy doing it, but you still did it because you were hoping they would love you. You would get something, right? You would get something out of it. but you didn't. Did you do this because you wanted them to like you, or did you do it because you were like, I'm going to do this and I could do it, and it's going to be awesome when I do it, right? And then they'll love it. They're not going to love me, they're going to love it, right? So who cares, right? There's a difference there. They're going to love this because of X, Y, and Z. Marie made me a gift because
Don't call me out.
Oh, hold on. Marie made me a gift because I'm her friend and she thought I would like it, right? Not because she wanted me to love her anymore, right? But because she just wanted to, and it made her happy because she did that, right?
Yeah.
And you enjoyed it, but you didn't expect anything out of it, anything in return, right? That's the good person, right? I'm buying this girl dinner hoping that she likes me. That's the people pleaser. I'm not going to argue with my teammate because I don't want to start a conflict and I don't want to get kicked off this team, or vice versa, right? People pleasing. I don't think there's a fine line between being a good person and being a people pleaser. I think there's a pretty far extent. And you have to go pretty far to be a people pleaser. Just being a good person is like, just genuinely being yourself. Sometimes it doesn't really, sometimes you're like, that's an interesting portion of that. I didn't know that that's going to work, but hey, being a good person just means you're being yourself. That's what it boils down to. Just being yourself.
I've been connecting things in my own personal life as you've been talking. And I just feel like it's funny because when people meet me, or when they're speaking to me and they've known me for a while or whatever, they'll just be like, oh, you're such a nice person, or it's so good to meet you, or whatever. And Colin has the complete opposite opinion of me. Not that I'm like a terrible horror or terrorist or anything like that. Or terror. I'm sorry. I did it this time. But he is like the only person in this world that I will literally speak my mind to. And he gets to see 110% of me. And not that I'm not a nice person, but I am honest and genuine to him. Whereas if I'm meeting a new person or I'm trying to be who I am at work, I'm people pleasing. I am people pleasing.
Yeah.
So that's just very interesting to hear you make that definition, because I'm like, I do that.
Yeah. And we all do it. We're all guilty of it.
In different aspects of my life, I'm just like, in
my perspective, I feel like when it comes to like work, depending on the circumstances, depending on where you're at, right? And depending on what's happening, I don't think you can technically be considered a people pleaser at work, because at the end of the day, right? Think of it like, the way I look at it is like this. Only reason I'm here is because you pay me to be here. I don't care anything about what happens here. This company could go belly up tomorrow and I could care less, right?
I'm the opposite.
It's going to suck because I'm not going to have a paycheck in a couple of weeks. But once I shut that door and once I turn that computer off, I don't care. Right?
I don't have that boundary.
But it's different. But yeah, like it's different though, because it's like,
I want that boundary because I feel like I don't have a good balance.
Yeah, most people don't.
I can't turn it off. I literally can't even sleep sometimes because I'm running formulas in my head on how to do better.
Right. Most people don't know how to turn that off, and it sucks. I mean, I've gotten better at I used to be that same way, but I've gotten better at turning it off because I'm like, there's nothing I can do about this. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, you are giving me money to be here and I'm going to do it the way you want me to do it. But once that computer light turns off, I don't care anything about what happens. Just yeah. So there's two different types of people in that, but setting that boundary, but I don't technically think you could be a people pleaser at work, because it's like, the only reason I'm here is because you give me money. I could care less. This is not we're a family. No, we're not.
I do people please at work.
Yeah. Well,
so don't say don't.
Okay, fine. All right.
There are definitely.
Well, okay. So that's me coming from my perspective, and what I do for a living is different than what you do. So for me, with where I'm at, I mean, do I like my coworkers? Yeah. Do I want to hang out with them outside of work? Probably not. Right. And it's not a slight on them. It's just, I'd rather not cross that boundary. I'd rather keep this to where it's at.
Good for you for setting your boundaries and
Well,
sticking to them.
You never know what could happen.
That's true.
Yeah, so you're like, I'd rather keep this where it's at. So when I shut this computer off, you don't exist anymore. No offense.
No.
If you're one of my coworkers, you're listening. I mean no offense by that. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things where it's like, you know what? Only reason I'm here is because I am being paid. And the reason I make this money so that I can go buy stuff that makes me happy, or I can, afford these other things that I like eating and groceries or eating and, stuff like that. So that's what that to me, that's what that is, right? That gives me X, Y, and Z, So but again, I work for a very large company. So it's easy for me to feel that mindset.
Sure.
So for you, I think it's a little bit different because you work for
a smaller company.
So it's easier for you.
I make more.
It's not a trap, but it's easier for you.
Ties to the people.
Yeah, it's easier for you to fall into that because it's like, this is technically might as well have started from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's different, and that's okay. Right, but that's just me I work for a large corporation, and
I get that.
Knock on wood, if I died tomorrow, my position's up on Indeed, and they're like, we need to fill this position.
Yeah.
So
you're just another chair.
I'm just another chair, exactly.
We'll move right into segment 3.
Okay.
Breaking the cycle. If being the nice guy doesn't work, what does? Glover talks about breaking out of these patterns and actually living a more authentic, assertive life. Let's go over some of his key strategies and see which one stands out. To start, the book emphasizes self-approval over seeking outside validation. Do you think that's easier said than done?
Oh, yes.
Loaded question.
Way easier than I'm sorry. What was it? Sorry. Way easier said than done, right? And me being who I am, I have always sought validation from other people. Right. That's always what I've wanted. I've always wanted that validation no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't do anything to get it. Well, at a certain point I would, but I needed it because I have never known that validation. I had never knew that growing up. I had no clue what that meant. And when I did get it, I wanted more of it. So I would actively, smacked my microphone. Sorry, y'all. I would actively seek it. And then when I didn't get it, I would continue to find it, and I would try to find more people, and that would try to get this validation for me, or would get me this validation. And it's just an unhealthy obsession of seeking validation. Whereas as I've sort of continued my journey and sort of like my evolution, so to speak, mm-hmm. there has been a lot more self-approval that has been happening, but it's come from different portions of changes that I've made. Because again, there's parts of me that I didn't like, but I didn't do anything to change it. So I was hoping that other people will tell me that that's okay. Right? So we talked a few weeks ago about, we've talked about, like in our conversation with Lena. Lena was talking about weight loss, and we were talking about, and then she was talking about how that holds people back sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, but when she said that immediately resonated with me because I utilized my weight as a way of keeping people away from me and keeping people at arm's length, mm-hmm. right? As in, I'm not going to go to this costume party because I'm not going to look good in this costume, or I'm not going to look good amongst these people. So it's easier for me not to do that, right? I'm not going to dress up at this fair because I'm not going to look as good and I'm not going to feel as comfortable, right? So I can keep these people away from me by doing so. That way, when I do see them, they'll be happy to see me, right? But the reality was I'm not happy with my weight, but I'm hoping that other people would be. I'm hoping that they will tell me that that's okay, right? That it's fine, that you're going to be fine the way you are, which is true. But at the end of the day, it's not, because I don't believe that. So even if you do validate those feelings for me, I still don't believe you because I don't like it.
Yeah.
So it's just a vicious cycle of it doesn't work. So that's where that self-approval comes into play. Well, I don't feel okay as big as I am. Self-approval is coming into play here. I'm losing weight and I feel a lot better. Emotionally, mentally, and physically, I feel a lot better.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So so, you look at it and it's like, it's easier for me to say that it's easier for me to seek it from other people. But at the end of the day, it's just not, if you want validation from anybody, it's not going to work and it's not going to change.
Until you have it for yourself.
Yeah, regardless of who it is, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have something that you don't like about yourself, but you're hoping other people do, right? And they say they like it, but deep down you don't like it. So you're going to seek it, continue seeking that validation from other people, and it's just not going to work out. So, but yeah, it's way easier said than done, and I am still discovering that as we speak. I will eventually get to that point. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I will eventually get to that point. I hope it's soon because it's a battle. It is a consistent, constant battle.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, yeah. It is insanely exhausting.
Glover says nice guys need to get comfortable with conflict and setting boundaries. How do you personally handle confrontation now? Or are you still figuring it out, which is totally fine?
I'm still figuring it out. And the reason being is because I haven't had any conflicts that have come into play that I haven't already like spoken about. Yeah. And I'll say is this is I'm trying to figure out like the best way because I haven't had any conflicts to where I've had to get comfortable with it. But I have gotten to the point to where I would be okay with the conflict and I would possibly almost welcome it because it just goes back to the fact that I'm just like, you know what? I'm not a doormat for anybody. And you know what? I am going to have to make that known. So if it comes to that, I'm going to cause a conflict and I have no problem doing it. How is that going to happen? I don't know. That terrifies me because we all know that I have a tendency of turning a microphone into, I'm not going to say it, but we know what it is. And what's going to happen when somebody actually makes me mad and pushes me to the point where I have to push them and I push back and I draw those boundaries. That's kind of what scares me. Is because what's going to happen when that does come into play. Mm-hmm. So
I feel like you're waiting for me to do that too.
For you to do what? To push me or to cause a conflict?
No, for me to use my microphone.
Oh yeah, I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. I can't wait for that day. That's going to be interesting. And yeah, you definitely need to use your microphone for sure. God have mercy on the person you use it on.
It's fine. It's healthy.
The look on your face tells me you know that that's not true. So we'll let that slide because you automatically know.
Sarcastic queen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Let me ask you a question, and you can tell me next if you don't want to talk about it. But you did mention a little bit ago that you came to head with a friend. Did you set a boundary there for yourself? Because I feel like that's a recent confrontation that you had to go through.
Yeah. So,
and again, you do not have to.
I did make it known that the boundaries that our friendship needed to be redrawn.
Okay.
And they were in agreement with that. I am still trying to figure out what those boundaries are going to be. I have in my head, I have an idea of what they are going to be and where I'm going to like sort of draw the line, but it's been communicated between the two of us that that needs to change. But those boundaries have not actually been communicated just because we haven't had a chance to actually sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
We've texted back and forth. We had we had our blow up, I guess, for lack of a better term. And then we hashed it out. There are still some more things that need to be said and need to be discussed, but we haven't had the opportunity to. But I think we are at a point to where it's okay.
Okay.
I have already made it known to them that I do not want to stop being a friend because of this or being their friend because of this.
Okay.
And that has been that is my mindset has been the entire time. So as far as those boundaries, they being redrawn, there has been agreement that it needs to be redrawn, but those boundaries haven't been discussed. Not because we don't want to, but because we just haven't had a chance to. I don't know exactly what those boundaries are. I'm still deciding what that's going to be, but I've already decided that that needs to happen and it's going to happen. But
do you feel like you were able to, for lack of better words, make that confrontation because you've read this book and you've been working on yourself? What do you feel like that would have looked like prior to? Like, if this had happened before you were on your journey and you were still stuck in your nice guy syndrome?
It probably would have turned into a lot of people pleasing, and it would have turned into me shaming myself and just doing everything I can to fix the relationship and just being like, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. I did all that. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And it would have been true, because it's like, that's not what happened at all. This is what happened. This is why this happened.
So you would have just.
Oh yeah, I would have died on that sword, and I would have been okay with it, because I'd be like, I'm not going to lose a friend. But from that perspective, and I hope this gets the point across, once that confrontation came into play, and once that happened, at first there was a lot of shock, and I did go through a moment of shame, because I'm like, they think I'm X, Y, and Z. No, that's not. And then, but immediately my head went, nope, that's not how we're doing this. This is not how this is going down. You are going to understand that what you thought did not happen. I'm sorry you thought that way, and I'm sorry I made you feel that way. But this is where it's at. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is the truth behind your feelings. I'm not invalidating your feelings. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be mad, because what you felt is different, or what you felt is your feelings. But this is what happened. This is the situation. You need to understand that, and this is what's going to happen going. And that's what it ended up being. I was not about to die on that sword. I was at that point,
You're fighting for you now.
Yeah, I was ready to, if I had to, I would have gone scorched earth, and I would have continued. It wouldn't have been pretty if I had to. Again, that's the scary part about where I'm at now is, if it's somebody else that I'm not as close to, that I haven't been friends with a long time, what's going to happen when that person pushes me? And it's like, no, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to do. And that's the way it's going to be. We can have a conversation about it, but this is how I feel. Yeah, I made it very clear that I understand how you felt, but that's, I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is, this is why you thought that. This is why you thought this happened. And by the way, I'm not happy either because of X, Y, and Z. So since you waited 2 months to tell me, I waited long enough to tell you this. So your cards are on the table. My cards are on the table. What do you want to do? Do you want to continue this fight? Because if we have to, I can turn this into a civil war. It is what it is. Or do you want to acknowledge the fact that both of us are a little out of touch with our friendship, and we need to redraw those boundaries and be a little bit more communicative, right? And there was an agreement between the two of us that needs to happen. We haven't had an actual discussion of how that's going to work going forward. We will, hopefully. But I was fighting. I was definitely fighting. I did fight for myself, and I was, like I said, I was willing to go, for lack of a better term, I was willing to go to war if I had to, and I was prepared, because of the fact that I hated the fact that friend was the reason I was going to take that stand, if that makes sense. I had not taken that stand in my entire life, but at that moment in time, that person was way too important to me for me to just allow this to continue or this to happen. So it's like, you know what? I was like, you know what? At this point, I'm not just fighting for me. I'm fighting for our friendship. And this is how this is going to go. Or sorry, we are going to discuss this like actual adults, or we can, we did it the way we wanted to do it, and it is what it is. So, but yeah, I was prepared. I was fully prepared to go into a knockdown drag out if I had to, because that's how much that person means to me. And I would have died on that hill knowing the fact that I fought, and I would have fought as much as I could. And that's the way it is. That's the way it was going to be, right? It's not about people pleasing, and it's not about, being a good person. It was about the fact that I understand how you feel, but this is what I feel. This is how this worked. If you want to continue fighting, we can. I'm prepared fully for it, but I don't want to do it. So, and I mean, as of right now, I mean, we're fine. We just haven't had a real conversation of, all right, let's move past that. Now what?
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of, I feel like that happens a lot with friendships or relationship, regardless of if this, you know, it says pick your battles, but at the same time, it's like, you don't really want to pick your battles. You know, you don't need to pick your battles. You need to have that battle regardless of the situation. It doesn't need to turn into a knockdown drag out. If it escalates to where that point to where, think about if they've been holding all this stuff in for X amount of years and they just unload it. Well, I guess we're doing this now, and I guess we're going to have this out. And then so that other person's going to return fire, and at that point, you just need to figure out, all right, you've laid your cards out, I've laid my cards out. How would you like to proceed? And then just go from there, and just stand your ground. Now, it doesn't mean like just be completely stubborn in what you want, but just make sure that they have an understanding, and you have an understanding of what is going to happen next.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mindset that I was in with that, and I was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to die on this sword. I'm going to die. Well, I'm going to die on this sword for a different reason. Knock on wood. We keep saying the word die. Not right. Or I do. But again,
I'm gonna get tagged. It's
right. But again, you know, I'm in fear of what that combat is going to look like when somebody pushes me that I don't really know. Not that I'm that big of a, not that I'm like super like a monster or anything. It's just this evolution has kind of turned things into like, well, here's what's going to happen, as opposed to, yeah, you know what, you're right. Completely understand. So.
Well, that is a really good segue into my next question, which is one big takeaway from the book is that nice guys need to prioritize themselves, which you've been doing. Do you think most guys feel guilty about putting their needs first?
Oh, absolutely. And it's it's a lot of the shame, because it's the feeling of toxic shame, and it's the feeling of when you put your needs before others, essentially, or you prioritize yourself, right? Regardless of if you're in a relationship or a friendship or whatever, they need something from you, but you're like, I can't because I've got X, Y, and Z, and I want to go do this. There's a lot of guilt there because you need to do this, or because you want to do this. But if you stick to those guns, so to speak, you'll be fine. Right. Most guys will not prioritize themselves because because again, as you know, depending on how you were raised, and again, this whole thing stems from how you were raised and how your life goes. But depending on how you were raised, you are conditioned, or sometimes you're conditioned to always provide for others. Well, I don't guess not provide for others, because that's, but it's, you need to make others happy, and you're always conditioned to do this, right? So when you don't do that, you're going against the grain, and you know, people are going to get upset. The people that, you know, want stuff from you are going to get upset.
Mhm.
But if you prioritize the stuff that makes you happy and continue down that path, it will make people respect you more, because then they know this person can't be manipulated. This person can't be told how to feel or what he wants to feel. This person is his own person, or this person is her own person. This is how they operate. So, but yeah, most guys will not prioritize themselves because they've always been conditioned to prioritize others and put their needs below them. So like, for example, like a big thing going on has been men's mental health. You know, it's been I would say a renaissance, so to speak, as far as like men taking control of their mental health, and you have other people advocating for it. And we're all like, men have always been conditioned to keep those feelings repressed and don't say anything and just continue forward and fight these battles. Well, I mean, you look at the results. The results speak for themselves, right? What happens? It's, you know, I mean, I don't want to get flagged, but most guys don't last very long. When when that starts happening, and when they don't take control, and when they don't prioritize themselves, other things take them. And that's where this comes into play. It's okay to be yourself, and it's okay to put yourself first. But that's, guys, we're conditioned to not do that. We have to be strong. We have to be, yeah, we do. Lack of a better term, we have to be strong. But if you're not and you can't handle it, yeah, just bottle it up. Don't cry. You'll be fine. Just continue forward. Just continue fighting. Well, we see the results. We see what happens. I'm just gonna leave it at that. That's in anything. If you don't prioritize yourself, that's where you're going to end up. And also, and this goes for and I feel like this goes for women as well. If you're not, we talked about all the time, if you're not responsible for your own happiness and you make others responsible for it, it's not going to work. It doesn't work. So
you'll never be truly happy.
You'll never truly be happy because if you're always seeking that validation and like, oh, this, I need him or whatever, that's fine. That's okay. But there needs to be other things that make you happy, continue that. So, but we see the results if you don't prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
In men and women and marriages. It just fails regardless. So and that's why, and I feel like most guys will feel guilty about putting themselves up front because they've always been conditioned to provide and be strong and never show emotions and make sure that everybody knows that, oh, this guy's strong. That's not the case. It's not the case. It is what it is. But we're conditioned to not feel that way. We're conditioned not to think that way. And that's a losing battle.
There's a song lyric which I can't look up because my phone's up there, but it's a Kelly Clarkson song. And I'm gonna totally get this wrong and forgive me, but she said, everyone thinks I'm the hero, but I cry alone, or something like that. I can't really remember the specifics of it, but everyone is looking at her going through her divorce very publicly. And this is when she released her last album. And they just see her fine and she's happy and she's on her talk show and she's just doing all of these things. And it's like she's not even phased. Well, obviously, because she's in the public eye. And you have to be on 114% of the time or someone's going to notice.
And it's going to make it.
Yeah, so she has to be, for lack of better words, her own hero in her private life, because if she doesn't, then,
who's going to do it?
Yeah.
Who's going to do it for you?
Yeah. I just thought that was so powerful. And I know that's not the real lyric. Don't come at me in the comments. But it's something like that. And it was every time I'm in my car singing it at volume 10, it just resonates with me because I feel that way about very recently about life. Is I'm so done letting people walk on me. I don't want to be a doormat. What you said last week, and that's why I made one, or 2 weeks ago, whatever. It's so important. It's so important that you value who you are as a person, because what you're giving, the energy, the aura, everything, you're needed.
Yeah. And also, the other thing too that my therapist brought up is what you resonate and what you put out is what you attract. So what is it that you want to attract, right? Do you want to attract people that are negative and always, I guess people pleasing? Do you want to attract that, or do you want to attract people who are, independent and, have no problem standing up for themselves, or will speak their mind and tell you what their needs are and help you understand how to make them happy, and will be okay with you prioritizing who you are, right?
Yeah.
What is it that you want? And that's what it boils down to, is what is it that you want? Well, I want X, Y, and Z. Well, you need to start exuding that. You need to put that in the atmosphere, because what you put out is what you get. And if you continue down this path, you're not going to get what you want, and it's just not going to work. So, and that's another thing that, like I said, that's what this book helps. It helps you understand exactly who you are. There's some changes and there are some changes that need to be made, but this is who you are. This is what you're going to be. This is what you want to be. Be it. Don't apologize for being it. Now, is there some form of refinement that needs to be done? Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's with anybody. But you need to figure out what that refinement is, and need to figure out if it's something you want to fix. lack of a better, not really fix, but kind of smooth the edges out a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm figuring out is like, I've been this same person my entire life, but that's not what I wanted to be. That's not who I wanted to be, right? Well, I want to be X, Y, and Z. All right, well, how do I get that? I got to start doing A, B, and C. I don't want to do A, B, and C. Well, do you want X, Y, and Z? Yeah, well, then you got to do this.
Yeah.
All right, fine, then I'll do it.
Yep.
And that's kind of what it's been. So it's like, this evolution has been occurring. And that was another thing too that I had to make sure I hope that my friend understood is there has been an evolution that has been occurring within me and within with me, right? Over the past few years. I'm understanding things that I didn't really understand beforehand, and I'm trying to understand it. And I'm trying to figure it out. That's been the biggest issue is I don't really know what's happening. Right? I know that it's good because I feel better and I know it's making me happy.
That's good.
But I don't know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Just like I need people to understand that there's a lot of changes going on, but it's going to be okay. There's some roughing edges that need to be refined out, and that's kind of like that's the kind of the point that if I do have that conversation when I have that conversation with a friend is like, I want you to understand that there's a lot of things that are changing with me. And I don't fully understand what's happening. I'm hoping that I can, but I need you to understand that I need help understanding this.
Yes.
I was dependent on you to understand. That's my fault, right? Think about, okay, there's another example right there. I was dependent on this friend, right, for 15, 20 years, right? As long as not 20 years, sorry. For 15 years, because we've been friends for so long, I was dependent on the fact that I was hoping that they would see this change and they would understand that I'm going through this evolution. No, they didn't understand that because, I've been the same person for 15 years, but things are changing, right? Could that have possibly been the reason why this escalated it? Maybe, I don't know. But instead of me saying, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on and I don't really understand it. Kind of hoping you stick by me and kind of help me understand this. Instead of me saying that, I was hoping they would understand. And they would be like, and then ask questions, be like, okay, well, why do you think that? Why do you feel that way? Right. Mm-hmm. But instead of me communicating that, I just hoped they would understand and get it, but it didn't. And it just turned into a completely almost knockdown, drag out argument or a fight.
The remnants of the nice guy syndrome as you're working through it.
Yeah. So it was like one of those things where it's like, this is happening and it's going and I'm trying to understand it, but I need you to help me out with this because I don't really understand what's happening and hopefully you can understand and help me understand. So instead of me communicating that, it was just like, they'll get it. They know me for long enough. They understand that that some things are flipping around, but it did. So
we're all here for you. We'll be looking forward to your updates on this.
Yeah, it's a consistent update, that's for certain.
Okay, I think that's a really good spot for us to hit into segment 4. Unless you have any other thoughts before we leave breaking the cycle.
Don't be afraid to prioritize yourself. Regardless of where you're at, it's okay to prioritize yourself. Do the things that make you happy and just, if people don't get it or help people get it. That's what I would say. Just help people understand and get it so that they can help you or kind of like help you rough those edges out a little bit. Because if you've been the nice guy your entire life and all of a sudden you're not the nice guy anymore, it affects everybody around you, right? And if they don't understand, well, people fear what they don't understand, right? It's fear. For example, if you have somebody who lives their life by black and white, right? But you operate in the gray, right? I mean, and then they want a black and white friend, but you're a gray friend, right? They're going to fear that gray because they don't understand that gray. Well, make them understand the gray, help them understand the gray. And if they don't see it that way, maybe you need to examine where you're at with that.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but make sure you help people understand. If you're going through the same thing that I am, do your best to make them understand. That's all I'm going to say. And then prioritize yourself, however that looks like. However that is to you, prioritize yourself.
I like that. I think way too often than not, we just forget that we have to care for ourselves. Too busy caring for other people to even stop and be like, did I eat today?
Yeah.
You know?
Am I taking care of myself
Yeah.
properly? Probably not.
Okay, segment 4, masculinity and growth. This book challenges a lot of the ideas around what it means to be a good man. Let's talk about how masculinity is evolving and how guys today are redefining what strength looks like. Do you think society still pushes men to be overly nice and avoid conflict?
Not so much now. I think there is enough information and I think there is enough stuff out there that makes men more comfortable with embracing a different side. Um, is there a point? Do I feel like there could possibly be a point where it's too much? Maybe. I don't know what that point is. That's not for me to decide. That's for the other person to decide. But I feel like there is enough information out there for people to understand that it's okay, or men to okay. For example, it goes back to breaking the cycle, right? So it took me what, 30 something years to want to break the cycle that I was in, right? Well, all right, take it back. I'll say 10 years or maybe 15 possibly. I don't know. Can't really break a cycle when you're 5 years old, but it took me that long to break that cycle, right? And now that I'm breaking that cycle, I'm breaking that generational curse, so to speak, that has come with my upbringing, right? So that's the key. There's enough information out there and there's enough research behind what's about this that it's okay to begin breaking that curse, or whatever you feel is holding you back. It's okay to break that. In whatever that looks like to you, embrace that. I don't know what too far. I don't know if there's too far or if there is too far. Maybe there is. I don't know. But I don't think there's too much, or I don't think there's a reason not to anymore, because there's enough information out there for people to understand that, oh, this is a thing and it needs to be talked about more. Let's do it. Right. Even if you have that, like, people telling you X, Y, and Z, and you're like, I don't really like that, still do it. Because again, at the end of the day, you are your own person. You are who you want to be. Figure it out and then move forward with that. Yeah. I don't think I think nowadays it's not so much as we are directed to avoid conflict as much as we were before. I think it's still a thing because there's still that generation that still instills that mindset of hold that together, hold that in. You can't be sad. You can't you can't cry. You can't do all this. You can't do that. Well, that's not true. You can if you want to. It's just up to you how you want to do it, and it's up to you how far do you want to go. That's the key. I would think that I would think you keep in mind how far do you want to go and embrace that, and then just go from there. So, I don't think society still pushes it. I think your relationships do, if that makes sense. Whether it be family or friends or whatever, your upbringing, I think that's it. I don't think society really cares anymore. I'm not going to name any names and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. There are still some influencers out there that will still push that mindset, but I think their society doesn't really give a crap anymore. Just do what you want to do. Just figure out how far do you want to go and then leave it at that. How far is too far? That's not for me to judge. I know what I want and I know what I'm going to do.
You know your own boundaries.
I know my own battles and I know my own boundaries and I know my own path. Figure that out for yourself and then figure out what it looks like for you. I think that's how that works.
Okay. Well, the book talks about healthy masculinity, being confident, direct, and self-respecting. Do you think men struggle with finding that balance?
So there's several things that I think that. So 2 things. One, there's lack of confidence and this nice guy syndrome. It's self-sabotaging, it's dishonest, and it leads to dependency, right? Dependent on others, right? So when you go from those three things to being confident, direct, and self-respecting, that changes your perspective on everything that you do and the way you see the world. You're no longer seeing it from a victim mentality. You're no longer seeing it from, oh, this is everybody's fault but mine. You're seeing it from a real standpoint of, yes, this happened. Could I have avoided it? Yes. Can I fix it? Do I really want to fix it? Do I need to fix it? Not really. Move on. You made a decision. Now you need to move on. Be confident in what you're doing and be confident in the battles that you want to do so. And then, but yeah, I think that men will always struggle. I don't think there will ever come a time. There are guys out there, and we all know who they are. There are men out there who are insanely confident, and they will always be who they are. They're charismatic, they're enigmatic, they are just who they are, right? We all know that. They're the lucky ones. They didn't struggle with that. They didn't get that point. Maybe they did at one point and they figured it out faster than I did or faster than anybody else did or whatever, right? There are guys out there that might not struggle with that portion, but there will always be those guys that struggle. That's where you need that again, that's where this book comes into play because it helps you understand, hey, it's okay for me to feel this way, but what do I do with that? What do I do with that information that I've been given? How do I embrace it, right? How do I embrace that confidence? Well, Dylan, I want to lose weight. I need to lose weight, right? Not only for my health and for my future, right? Whatever that future looks like, but also just for my confidence. I have never been confident in myself because of my weight. Well, how do I fix that? You need to drop your weight. You're going to feel a lot better. You know what I'm saying? So embracing whatever helps you understand that, do that. But yeah, there will always be a struggle with that, regardless of what it is. It could be self-respecting, it could be confident, it could be directness. There will always be that. It could be all three, which it's been all three for me.
Yeah.
But I think there will always be there will always be a struggle finding the balance between the two, because one is going to, like, being direct can often be, sometimes you can be too direct and turn aggressive. Not because you're meaning to, but because you've never done this before, so you don't really know what that looks like, right?
Right.
Self-confidence, I used to have the saying, I can't remember where I got it from, but it was from a movie. He goes, he said, you are incredibly arrogant. He goes, you call it arrogance, I call it confidence. There's a pretty big difference there between being confident and being arrogant. That's the struggle. How far is too far, right? And then self-respecting is, what do I want people to look at me and remember, or what I want to see? What do I want people to see when they look at me? That's the self-reflect. I feel like that's the self-respectful. I don't think there's another too far with that. Well, I think that could be maybe power hungry or whatever. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure how far. Because confidence too far is arrogance. There's a fine line between it. Direct and aggressive. There's a there's far and there's too far, right? Self-respecting, I'm not sure what too far looks like for self-respective. So that's where you got to figure out how far is too far. But again, how far is too far for you? That's going to be the struggle. I don't know how far. I've never done this before. I don't know what too far looks like. So that's why you got to lean on your friends. Like, hey, man, it's a little far. Let's reel it back in. I like it, but let's not do that. Not that way, And I think that's where you can rely on your friends and on your friends to be like, hey, that was good, but you went a little too far. Next time, let's reel it in a little bit. So that's what I think. So I kind of pushed on that too far.
No, I think it's fine. Confidence is such a hard concept to understand about yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you have it and you are born with it, then
congratulations.
Yeah. But
can you pass some along?
If you're learning about it for yourself, then it's one of the hardest things that you will ever adopt for yourself. But I was reading one of our notes in here, and it really set a tone or resonated with me, for lack of all of the words. Confidence is taking responsibility of your own needs and desires. I think someone who grew up just being told that you take responsibility for yourself and your needs and will just automatically walk in a room and be like, I'm here I am, love me.
Pay attention, right?
Versus someone who's like has a nice guy, I'm gonna do everything in my power to make you happy, not myself. I don't care what it does to me or my self-esteem. I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that you have the best day ever.
Yeah. And
you're catering to that person without even taking a glance backwards at yourself. And that's when you look in the mirror and you're like,
why did I do that?
What am I doing? I deserve that too.
Mm-hmm. And they're not doing that for me. I'm doing all that work to make them happy, and they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's when, and I feel like that's also when things get convoluted, because you're like, I'm doing all this work for them to make them happy, but they're not doing any of it. And they're not doing anything for me, which that's where that's that toxic mindset that comes into play. Is like, you're not really doing anything for me. Why do I keep you around? Right.
And that's when you explode.
And that's when you explode, exactly. Because then you're like, well, what have you done for me lately? Which is a toxic mindset in a friendship or a relationship, regardless, right?
Yeah.
Does that need to be discussed? Absolutely. Because it's like, I am doing all of this and you haven't reciprocated it, right? Why? Like, you're just utilizing what I have, because I could take this energy that I'm providing you and put it to better use, right? And I'll give you another example. The energy that I was providing in my relationships, or in my relationships, right? All that energy I was giving to being a people pleaser, making them happy, buying these flowers, buying these chocolates, buying these dinners, all this energy that I was giving, right? I took that energy and I put it into different things. All that other stuff, I started putting it into my own perspective, right? I took that energy, and instead of trying to make somebody else happy, what's going to make me happy? Well, getting this damn podcast off the ground would really make me happy. All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let me focus my energy on that. Let me put the same damn energy that Marie has into putting that together. And let's do that. Okay. Let me shift that. Let me take that energy and put it elsewhere. Right. All this energy that I had, all this creativity that comes into play, is because all that energy that I was putting into these stuff that wasn't really doing anything for me, and these people that weren't helping me, I'm putting it into other things, and I am creating and I am growing.
I see it.
You see what I'm saying? So it's like, I've done all these things for these people, and it's not reciprocating, and it's not providing me the energy that I need to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to stop doing that, and then I'm going to do it. Then I'm just going to have to do it on my own. It is what it is. Well, not really on my own, but you see what I'm saying, right? I'm going to take this from you, and now, and that's kind of toxic in its own way, because like, I'm going to take this energy that I've been giving you, I'm going to take it away from you, and I'm going to see how you react. And your reaction is going to tell me everything I need to know about where I stand and how you feel about me, right? Sometimes that sucks, but you take it, put it somewhere else, and all of a sudden, where do they go? Go get it from somebody else. That's kind of...
And then you're mad.
So that's kind of been my mindset of the other growth of that is I stopped doing that. I stopped adding that energy to people that didn't appreciate it and didn't respect it and didn't reciprocate it, and not in a covert way, but I took that and I put it elsewhere, and now I am miles ahead of where I ever thought I would be. Right? Is there still a lot of work that goes into it? Yeah, hell yeah, there is. But again, there's a lot of creativity that I'm coming up with, and a lot of energy that I'm expending on other things as opposed to giving it to somebody else. So that's kind of my mindset.
Do you think there's pressure to be a fixer in relationships rather than just being yourself?
I don't think there's pressure per se from society. No, I don't really think anybody really, like, people outside of your relationship. Personally, I don't want to say they don't really care, right? But from a societal standpoint, I don't think there's a lot of pressure to be a fixer. I think that's an internal battle, and I think that is your own doing, right? So we talked about it in a few episodes. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring it back up. I have it highlighted because it really made me think about the my dating mindset, my dating life. So here's what the fixer will give you. Okay. It is true that nice guys often pick partners who appear to be projects. And indeed, they do at times pick some pretty messed up people. The fact that these partners have challenges, they are single moms, they have financial problems, they are angry, addictive, depressed, overweight, non-sexual, or unable to be faithful, is precisely the reason nice guys invite these people into their lives. So think about that for a second, right? There are a few things that you can take out of that, right? That is what the fixer mindset gets you. I don't know of any person who finds those traits attractive, but those are the type of people that a fixer will attract. And that is not a societal thing. That is an internal thing. That is who you project. When you project that I can fix this, regardless of like, I can fix this person, I can fix this situation, I can help with the situation. That is what you're going to get. And that's just going to cause more problems. I don't think there's pressure to be a fixer. I think when you exude that, you attract it. And then all of a sudden you're now, okay, well, she's really pretty. She's got all these problems. Let me try to fix this right quick. What's going to happen? Right? It doesn't work out. And then all of a sudden you have to and then you want to find another project and then another and another. But again, it just goes back to, I'm taking that fixer energy that I had and I'm putting it elsewhere into other projects that make me happy. So I don't think there's a lot of pressure. I think the pressure's internal. And I'm not entirely sure where that fixer mindset comes from. I think it's just the fact that sometimes you enter these relationships with these people that are emotionally unavailable, or they've got all these problems, and it's just one after the other, and eventually you're just like, well, this is what I attracted, or this is, I like this, or whatever. In reality, you don't, but this is the only person that likes me.
I think you just answered your own question. I think you say you don't know where it comes from, but I think you just answered that, because you had mentioned earlier that like what you put out is what you're gonna get. And I think that as a nice guy, you, for lack of better words, think that that's the best you're ever gonna get, and you don't ask for what you want. So you're just thinking, well, if this is that's all I can get, I'll just go and fix it and be happy, and then never be happy.
Yeah, what happens? But it's a double-edged sword. Like, what happens when you do fix it? Right?
They tend to just leave.
Exactly. They find you're like, I see those things on Facebook all the time. Like, I fixed this man for somebody else, right? I raised this guy and I fixed him for somebody else. Yeah. Same women. So yeah, don't do that. There's nothing wrong with being a fixer, I would think, right? But fix the right things, for love of God. That's all. That's what it. That's
so much to ask.
Yeah, for, like just like. I know sometimes it's hard. You know what? And honestly, I'll be honest with you. It's hard to recognize that sometimes, right? Because you meet somebody and they've got all these, single mom who's struggling. You don't really resonate with that, but you understand. I know how tough that is because I've seen it. Right? They're depressed. They've got these addictions, and you're like, all you want to do is you don't really want to fix them, but you just want to help. All right, you want to just be there, and then all of a sudden, you go from helping to trying to fix it, and then that just kind of leads to like, oh well, they'll love me more if I continue to help them fix this. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody, and I don't think anybody enters a relationship hoping to fix somebody. Maybe, I don't know. But I think they enter it thinking, I think they get into it and they see a different side of that person once they see past those qualities. You're like, okay, they're not as bad as what they're putting out.
Yeah.
Let me latch on to that, and then we can work through this other stuff. When in reality, you can't do that. They have to do that.
They have to want
to do that. And then what happens is they don't want to do that, and then you're left with having no clue what to do next. And then all of a sudden you're on your ass going, well, now what? I don't have any friends because they all left. I don't have my friends because they walked away from me because I was in this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think there's really a pressure to be a fictional relationship. I think they put their own pressure on that from both ends of the coin. Man, I think we're all guilty of that.
100. and 14 million times 5%. Yes. Okay. My last question, so feel free to expand as much as you want to. If there's one thing from this book that you wish more men understood, what would it be?
There's a lot of things I wish.
And that's fine.
I think
You're like, just read it.
I was gonna say just
All
read the
of
book.
it.
You'll figure it out eventually. But I think the three things, and there's a multiple things. So the first one I have is embrace assertiveness and assertiveness, not aggressiveness. It's okay to be direct, honest, and assertive rather than passive or aggressive.
Okay.
It means sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah.
Embrace that no. Asking for what they want, asking for what you want, and handling conflict with confidence instead of avoiding it. We just hit the nail on the head. If you miss, stop trying to fix or save others. I have told this for the longest time. So we were talking about my social media handles as Super Dylan 10. What is my superpower? My superpower has always been trying to save others. Well, I am, and I have always prided myself by saying, at the end of the day, I've started telling myself this: I am not a nice guy. I don't wear a white hat. I will no longer be Super Dylan. That will always be my moniker. So people used to ask me what my superpower was, and I'm like, I'm a nice guy. I'm fun to be around. It's not. It's just a moniker, but I embrace that. I will no longer be. I have told myself that I am not a hero. I will no longer try to save people. That is not what I'm doing. I can't. That's what I used to do. That's what I wanted to do, but I will no longer do that. So do not try to save others. You can help them. You can guide them towards the right path. If you have the resources available, or you have people in your life that that could guide them in the right place, do that. Do not try to save them, because it's not fun. It sucks. Trying to save somebody sucks, and I will no longer do that. I am not a hero. I just don't do that. Develop stronger male relationships. That's another thing that I feel like most nice guys don't have deep friendships with other men. Does that make sense? So the book emphasizes the importance of building solid male support system for guidance, accountability, and shared experiences. So it doesn't necessarily mean like the toxic masculinity or the frat parties or the frat guys. Don't do that. Create stronger male bonds and seek those relationships, because again, it's just going to help you understand things a lot more about, I guess, for lack of a term, being a guy. That's something that I wish I knew earlier on, because for the longest time, some of my closest friends were female for the longest time. Right?
Yeah.
Didn't really have a lot of, I didn't really have a lot of male friends. I think I can count on one hand how many male friends I had, and they weren't really that big of a friendship. And they weren't really that big of a bond. Prioritize personal growth and independence. Instead of seeking happiness through others, focus on your own goals, passions, and self-improvements. Financial independence, emotional stability, and personal fulfillment and that's going to make you more attractive and confident. Not sure if it's going to work for me. I'm still trying to figure that out. Maybe it does. It hasn't worked. I've been doing that here for over, I would say about a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer, maybe, I don't know, but I would think that. And then own your desires without shame. This is another one that I'm probably going to reach on, but I think it needs to be talked about. So a lot of nice guys will suppress their sexuality and ambitions due to guilt, of fear, or judgment. Again, too far is too far, right? There is too far to that. But if you embrace your masculinity, you pursue what you truly want and stop apologizing for being yourself. That's the key. Embrace your sexuality as a guy, right? And don't be afraid of being in fear. I'm still struggling with that myself, the whole fear of judgment. But that would be another thing that book explains is, at the end of the day, nice guys will finish last. That's pretty much the tone of the book, is you're going to finish last, regardless of what it is. No matter what it is, it's just not gonna work out. So, but yeah, that would probably be those biggest takeaways that I've had from the book. A couple of those things I am still working on and still struggling with and trying to figure out what exactly those mean to me.
Okay.
But yeah, own your whatever your desires are, own those without shame. And that's a really hard thing to
That is hard.
that's a hard thing to swallow because there is going to be a form of shame when you have your own desires and what they are, regardless of what you think that is, right? Whatever, when I say desires, if you're listening to this, when you say desires, when I say desires, whatever comes to your mind, there will always be a shame, regardless of what it is, because we're told not to. And there is always going to be some form of shame, regardless of what that is, what desire looks like. But embrace that and own it. And nobody really has to know what those desires are, right? Except for those people closest to you, or the people that you want.
Yeah.
The people that you want to know the people that you want to know these things, that's what you want them to know, right? Right. Just embrace it and just try to not feel the shame that's going to come with it. That's going to happen. I know for a fact that it happens to me all the time. There are certain things that there's certain desires that I want, and I'm just like, there's a little bit of shame guilted there. But again, it's no different than anybody else.
I think that I totally see what you're saying, but I don't think that I don't think all desires are taboo.
No. Nothing, not everything is taboo. But what I was saying is, I guess it would be just depending on what you feel comfortable explaining. You don't want to okay, I don't know. there are shows out there that will go out there and go off the deep end and talk about all sorts of sexual monikers and all sorts of stuff, right? They'll just go off the deep end and talk about everything, right? If that is okay with you, then do so. But if you want to only tell that to people that you're the closest to, or vice versa, or whatever, then that's okay too. Just try to not feel shame for taking what you want and owning what you want. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So
I see what you're saying. I guess I understood it more like you. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just whatever that looks like, and whatever that owning looks like to you, do so. However that looks like. If you want to tell the whole damn world, right, that you like a certain thing, cool. If you want to tell one other person, or you just want to tell people that are closest to you, that's cool too. Just the biggest key is don't feel the shame, regardless of how you do it. Or try not to feel the shame. There is always going to be some shame that's accompanied with it, and that's from other people, right? But, try to embrace. See? We started talking about the whole sexuality thing, and that's a whole nother aspect. And that book, I'm not going to touch on that because the book touches on that, and I feel like that might be a little bit too far-fetched with what we're trying to get out. Maybe we can discuss it at a later date. I know I keep saying that, we say that in a lot of shows, but maybe we can discuss it. I don't know. But yeah, but again, one of the biggest takeaways for me was owning your desires without shame. And the biggest thing was without shame. Because there's no shame in what you want.
Well, that's how that ties right back into the confidence and owning all of what you want. Yeah. Just don't be
ashamed of what you exactly want, right?
Is there anything else you want to share before we go into our little game?
No, I think that's it. I think I've delved into a lot of the things that I've discovered in the book without giving too much away. Because again, I'm not an expert, and I will never claim to be, but this is probably one of the best books that I've read. And the problem, the worst part is though, this book came out in 2007, and I'm learning about this book in 2022. So yeah, read the book. There are a few YouTube videos that he's done. There are a few podcasts that he's done that he's been on here most recently. I would highly recommend, if this is something that you want to pursue or you want to figure out, I would highly recommend watching those and reading the book, because again, there's stuff on here that we didn't even touch on that are in this book. It's going to change your mindset on a few things. If you're a woman, I highly recommend reading this book too, just because, there have been studies, or there have been case studies that he has utilized in his book with some of his patients, where those patients' wives and girlfriends have come back and said, thank God you figured this out, because I couldn't figure it out, or vice versa. Saved some relationships. But again, so I'm not saying, okay, hold on. I'm not saying that's what it's going to do, but I am saying that there is a lot of truth to what this is. And honestly, I feel like the reason this book wasn't talked about more was because when this book was first published, there was a lot of public backlash from the female perspective on this book. And
I could see that.
Yeah. You're telling these guys to do the complete opposite of what they should be doing or what we want them to do. Well, that's not right. Well, it's not right because, well, you don't like it. That's why it's not right, because you don't like it. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to read the statement. You're going to tell me if it's a myth or a fact in your opinion. And then I'm going to tell you what is, I guess, technically the answer, but I'm sure you'll. Anyway.
I don't think there's any right.
If you're unsure, I will try to give you a hint.
Okay.
So, being nice will automatically lead to a happy relationship.
Myth. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Relationships need more than just being nice. They need honesty, communication, self-respect. Being overly accommodating can lead to resentment and unmet needs. Very good. I'm proud of you. And number 2, nice guys often struggle with expressing their needs directly.
Fact.
Yep. Many nice guys avoid confrontation and hope people will just figure out what they want, which we've nailed 14 times on this episode. Healthy relationships require clear and direct communication. Okay, number 3. Setting boundaries means you're being rude or selfish.
Myth.
Setting boundaries is actually an act of self-respect and mutual respect. It prevents burnout, resentment, and unhealthy relationships. And if you feel like you want to add anything else to what I'm saying, feel free.
I do want to add to this one.
Okay.
If you're setting boundaries, if somebody says you're being rude or selfish for setting your boundaries, then that person no longer needs to be associated with you. If no ifs, ands, or buts about it,
they are now outside the boundary.
They need to be they need to be outside the circle, outside the bubble, outside the door. You need to create an escape plan and get out. And then when they reach out to you, you can tell them this is the way it's going to be. Point blank.
Agreed. They'll
figure it out eventually, and if they don't, then they don't need to be around you.
Yeah, they will poison your boundary. Okay, number 4, nice guys often have covert contracts, unspoken expectations that lead to frustration.
Fact.
Yes, a covert contract is when someone does something nice but secretly expects something in return. When the other person doesn't reciprocate because they had no idea about what the deal was, the nice guy gets upset. Number 5, if you're truly a good person, people will automatically appreciate and reward you.
I'm going to say myth on that one because there's no true reward for being a good person, an actual true person. Sorry, there's no reward for actually being a genuine good person. Exactly.
The world doesn't work that way. People respect confidence and clear communication. If you don't ask for what you want, you might not get it. Nice! I saw that one kind of tripped you up. Number 6, avoiding conflict actually makes relationships stronger.
Myth.
Avoiding conflict often builds hidden resentment. Healthy conflict leads to better understanding and stronger relationships. It was what you were saying earlier when you were saying conflicts are a sign of a healthy relationship.
And sometimes those fights need to happen.
Number 7, nice guys tend to struggle with self-approval and rely too much on external validation.
Fact.
Yep. Nice guys base their self-worth on how others react to them. True confidence comes from valuing yourself without needing constant approval.
And I will add that with the reason that that nice guys rely on self-approval and external validation is because we don't get a lot of it. And when we get it, we want more of it. So that's where that stems from. For example, I don't know how to react when someone says I'm handsome or I'm cute or whatever, right? I don't know how to react to that. It's hard, right? Because again, that doesn't happen that often, right? You don't hear that often. So when you hear it, you latch onto it, and then you start going down a rabbit hole that you shouldn't really go on. But you just, or you have pretty eyes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's where that leads from, is we don't hear that often, and when we do, we want more of it. Oh. So it's a double-edged sword. So I will add that that's why that happens.
Being a nice guy is the same as being a good man.
Myth.
Yep. A nice guy is someone who tries too hard to please others at their own expense. A good man is someone who is kind, honest, and self-respecting without being a pushover. Man, that's powerful. Number 9, being honest about what you want makes you more attractive and respected.
That is definitely a fact. That is completely true. I just don't know how that works because I'm still trying to figure that out.
Okay, so this is where you are in your evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So it says confidence and directness are key traits people respect. When you express what you want without hesitation, people take you more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's more from a possible relationship standpoint and dating standpoint, as opposed to like real life, like with work and stuff like that. I think for me, that's where it's being honest. It makes you more attractive. I don't know how that makes you more attractive because I don't see it. I don't get that. I don't get the opportunity to present that. Oh.
We actually only have one more.
Okay, cool.
Nice guys can break the cycle by focusing on their own needs and goals first.
That is 100% a fact. When you put your own energy into things that you want and your own desires, other people will see that and they'll want to be a part of it. Essentially, is what I believe.
Yeah, the healthiest relationships come when both people have their own fulfilling lives. Prioritizing yourself isn't selfish, it actually makes you a better partner, friend, and person. Okay. Well, you got every single one right. Good job. Congratulations. There is no... Your reward is going and getting a beer with me after this, so you're welcome.
Agreed.
So let's talk about our final thoughts. The biggest takeaway from this book, what you shared, was just owning your
whatever
who you are.
Yeah, whatever your goals and ambitions are, and whatever you want to be, own that, and then figure out how to get to it. Surround yourself with the people that want to see that happen and that can help you make that happen. Stop being a nice guy, or the lack thereof. Don't be fake. Don't create these contracts that nobody knows about. Don't do any of this. It's just prioritize your own happiness over others and essentially just do the best you can. That's kind of my biggest takeaway. There are more stuff in that book, but I'm going to save that for those people who actually read this. Okay. I don't want to give everything up front because it's a better read than I am doing justice for.
I think you did a great job, and I'm glad we did this. I feel like there is a parallel to being a nice girl. And a lot of what you said, I feel like I resonated with. Things that I would do, or especially growing up and in high school and figuring out, I don't know, I guess who I am and what I wanted out of a relationship before I actually entered into one that it wasn't healthy at the beginning. It was searching for something that I thought I wanted, and then we figured out together how to communicate and But yeah, definitely looking back at my prior relationships and even the ones that we've spoken about, the instances we've spoken about where I was stuck in the middle of being cheated on and I just was okay with it. That was something that I thought he wanted me to say. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't and I don't think I recognized that until literally we were speaking about it today. So it wasn't what I wanted. I wasn't okay with it, but I said it was fine because I thought that's what he wanted from me.
One of these closing thoughts you have here is, would you recommend this book to other men? Of course, I would, absolutely, 100%. But you have a note here that says, what about women who want to understand the men in their lives better? Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend it on that basis, but also I would also recommend it to women as well, because women can be too nice. We're all guilty of it. There is a lot of parallels in this book that can resonate with women as well. It's not just it says no more Mr. Nice Guy, but it does resonate with women. It leans more towards assisting men with their masculinity and embracing themselves. But I don't think if you're a woman who just wants to read this to understand men better, right? I think it can also help you discover a little bit more about yourself as well and make you a little bit more aware of what goes on and the traps that you've been put yourself in as well, and vice versa, right? So I would highly recommend it to, even if you're a woman if you just want to understand men better, if that's the thing. Because guys want to understand women better too. You know, when there's a book about that, we'll take that. But I did that reminds me, there was a TikTok video that I saw where a guy was like, men are dogs, but women are like cats. And in the red, and I thought about that, and I was like, and they said that men, like, you know, they love the attention, they want the attention, and you give them the attention, they'll get more, they'll want more of it, and they'll love you more, right? And that's kind of how dogs are, right? You know, you love them, right? But with women, the less attention you pay to them, the more they're going to seek it out. And my first thought was, I feel like that's true, but if I spray my girlfriend with a water bottle,
Oh my God. No.
I don't think that's going to be funny as hell. I saw that video, and I'm sure a lot of people said it. It made me laugh because I'm like, well, I can't really spray my girlfriend with a water bottle. I'd be like, no, stop it. That would get a lot of trouble.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's hilarious.
He's just being nice. I think we have ran the gambit on what we can talk about. I hope you guys. Okay, so we've gone
2 hours and 40 something minutes. I can't see it because it's being blocked.
Which is pretty much par for the courses of what we've done before. We've done this a couple of times. If you stuck with us this long, I appreciate it. Well, we both appreciate it very much. I hope you found this enlightening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you read the book. You definitely need to read the book. If you're not a reader, it is available on Spotify for free, Audible. There are YouTube videos where Dr. Glover goes into further detail as to the details in the book. It kind of highlights a few things as well. I highly recommend all the things that he puts out there. Hopefully, like I said, any of these shows that we do, hopefully you got a little bit out of it and you enjoyed it. If that's the case, like, subscribe, and we will definitely see you in the next one. And leave a review. Start leaving reviews. We need you guys to be more conversational and be a little bit more open as to what you want and what you want to see. We need that because
I do want to give a shout out and pat ourselves on the back for we've hit 10,000 views on YouTube, which is like huge. It's not huge for, if you look at it in a standpoint of other influencers, but for us, we're like, I was texting Dylan, I was like, oh my gosh, we're almost at 10,000. We were just like mind blown.
Yeah, we were at 6,000 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
we
so appreciate.
Yeah, we
all of it.
Yeah, and here's the sad part is we want more of it, guys. The problem is we want you guys to tell us everything that you want to see and what you want to hear. What do you want to hear more of? What is it? What you want? What do you like? What do you dislike? Tell us all of that. We need that.
I want it all.
But yeah, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and we will definitely see you in the next one.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.